Well, today's Thursday, so it's story day. Instead of telling you a long, intricate story, I want to do something else today. And I want to introduce it by referencing a motto which I'm told goes back to the ancient Greeks. What is the ideal education? The ideal education is to know something about everything and everything about something. Why would that be the ideal education? Well, first of all, if you know something, if you know everything about something, you're an expert in that one thing, you can rely on your own judgment in that one area. You could be a source of information for other people who need information in that area. And it's certainly something which is beneficial. Why do you need to know something about everything? Well, you can't predict what kinds of circumstances you will encounter. To have some familiarity with a wide variety of subjects puts you in a position at least not to be completely overwhelmed. So you have some sense of familiarity with a wide variety of subjects. But in addition, more subtly, because you know everything about something, then you're aware of how ignorant you are in all the other areas. Because you have a direct experience of what it is to be a master of a subject. And you know that in the other subjects you're not a master. And the implication of that is you know when to ask questions, not to trust your own judgment. One of the great gifts in life is to know when you need to ask. Shall I reference from the river to the sea, where a lot of the people chanting it don't know which river or which sea? You would have thought maybe they would have stopped to think, what am I talking about? But no, it's the chant and waving the flag and being part of the solidarity that counts, and the words don't matter too much. Now, the theme that I want to bring about with the stories I'm going to tell you is not what you should do. These are going to be stories about great people and how they handled various situations, but rather the outcomes in many of these stories are surprising. You wouldn't have anticipated them. They may even be unintuitive. And the lesson that I would like to get across is, well, if these stories took place, then when something happens to me and I have to make a decision, maybe I'd better ask, because my intuitions, my natural judgments may be completely off base. So, in some cases, I will tell you who the great person was, because these are published in biographies. In other cases, I know the story from personal sources, so I won't mention the name, because I don't really have permission to mention the name. A friend of mine told me the following story. There was a boy in one of the about two yeshivas, could have been Ohr Somayach, or maybe another one, who needed to ask a very sensitive question to a great Jewish decider, a great posek. So my friend took him to one of the greatest in the world, someone whose name is known all over the world. What was his question? Well, this boy's father was a conservative rabbi, and he's going home for the summer. What should he do? Should he attend the services in his father's synagogue, or should he not? So he went to this very great person, and this very great person said, yes, you should attend the synagogue, the services in your father's synagogue. The boy said, but after the services, there's a receiving line. There's the rabbi and the head of the synagogue, and I, being the rabbi's son, will be expected to stand in the receiving line. So the posek said, so stand in the receiving line. Yes, but look, the practice is, the congregants come up and they shake hands with the people in the receiving line. And some of the congregants are women. And so this posek said, so shake hands with the women. Rabbanei Ashkenaz hitiru vehem lo hayu shkatzim. The rabbis of Germany permitted it, and they were not throwaways. I didn't anticipate that answer. I know the Shita of the rabbis of Germany, but I didn't know that would be paskin Now, I don't know what the dynamics are, what his relationship with the father was, and what the consequences would be. But if someone had asked me that question, I definitely would have said it's not permissible. And I heard that, and I thought, well, maybe I should, be a little more suspicious of my judgment, and therefore ask questions even when they seem obvious to me. Another such question, which in a way is even more surprising, was attending an intermarriage in the family. And this person went to a great decider, a great posting, and that person's particular case said, yes, you can attend the intermarriage. So these are things which come up, especially in Baal Tshuva circles, and you should know that these questions that are worth asking. And there are a number of incidents in the life of Yaakov Kamenetsky, which I think are extremely instructive. The first appointment that he got as a rabbi was in Lithuania, in a small, very impoverished town. They hired him as his rabbi, and very quickly he found out that they only had money for either a rabbi or a doctor. And they decided that they would hire a rabbi and not have a resident doctor. Now stretch your imagination. What do you think he did about it? What do you think how did he handle the situation that they chose to have a rabbi rather than a doctor? Yeah.
I've heard it before.
I can't hear you.
I've heard the story before.
Then let other people think. Let other people try to figure it out. Yeah.
Did he become a doctor?
Okay. He was a genius, and he was fluent in Russian. He got hold of a Russian medical textbook and read the whole textbook from cover to cover. And with his mind, I was told he read it in 3 nights. And in his mind, he understood it so well that when people came to talk to him about medical cases, they thought he was a doctor. I could easily imagine someone saying, I know what he did. He established special times to say Psalms, so they'll have special divine help so that people won't get sick. Maybe that could be done also, but that isn't what he did. What he did was he made himself competent in medicine so that they would have the benefit of informed medical advice in addition to having a rabbi. That's how he took responsibility for the community. Because a rabbi is not just someone who's an expert in rabbinics, like an expert car mechanic who fixes cars and then goes, gets drunk in the bar. No, being the rabbi of the community means he's responsible for the community. And that's how he took responsibility for them. Here's another incident from his life. I'll tell you what was the decision. You tell me what you think about the options. There was a rabbinical gathering with thousands of people, and it was in a great hall. And then there was a stage, and all the famous rabbis were sitting on the stage, and the audience was sitting in the hall. Our custom is that if you're in a room and one of the great rabbinic scholars and saints of the generation comes in, you stand up. So Rabbi Kamenetsky was together with someone else, and this person said, I happen to know this hall, and I happen to know that there's a back door. And the back door goes straight onto the stage. So I suggest that instead of walking from the front door and walking down the whole hall and causing everybody to stand up for us, let's go in the back door where either we won't attract attention at all or people will stand up momentarily. And that way we won't cause any extra effort on the part of the audience, and we can avoid perhaps feeling proud and so forth and so on. That was his suggestion. Yaakov said, no, we're going to go in the front door. Could you imagine a reason why you would want to do that? Say it again? He can't release people from the obligation to give him honor. Okay. There are two incorrect assumptions in that statement. First of all, a rabbi can release other people from giving him honor. The only one who cannot release people is the king, but a rabbi can. And the Gemara says because the Torah belongs to him, and since it's his Torah, it's not the Torah, it's his Torah. So he is studying his Torah. That's the way the Gemara interprets the verse, and therefore a Rav can release other people from the obligation to show honor. Number one, and number two, by coming in the back door, that wouldn't be releasing them from the obligation of honor. To release them from the obligation would be to come in the front door and tell everybody to sit down. Don't get up for me, and walk by. That would be releasing them. But coming in the back door means there's no trigger of the obligation to show him honor. So that wouldn't be releasing them. Sorry?
Give them the opportunity.
This is okay. It's a different idea. To give them an opportunity to show honor for the Torah. Okay, that's a thought. It isn't what he said, but it's close in a way. That's a thought. After all, their showing honor for Torah is a positive thing for them. It's a mitzvah for them. It's an expression of a value, something that you'd like to reinforce. Yeah, that could be a possibility.
But wouldn't they stand up for him anyways when he gets on the stage, even if he doesn't?
You have a stage there with 150 people, right? Yeah, front row, second row, third row. Somebody comes in the back door. There are 5 rows of people in front of him. Who knows if they're going to see him or not? How long will they stand up till he takes his seat? 30 seconds rather than 5 minutes to walk down the front. Right? You're minimizing it. The possibility to avoid it altogether, and you can minimize it that way. Listen to what he said. He said, our wives give up a lot in terms of our attention because we are subject to public needs all the time. We get calls in the middle of the night. Sometimes we have to take trips. Let our wives see what they're giving up for. Let them see what they're participating in, what they're contributing to by allowing us to serve the public in that way. What he had in mind was the reinforcement of his wife's confidence in what she is giving him as a gift. Now, maybe that wouldn't have occurred to you. It didn't occur to me until I read the story. And what I learned from it is, when I have interactions with my wife, I better take seriously the thought that maybe I don't know the right thing to do, because I never would have thought of that. And maybe I should ask and get guidance. Here's another story about him. He was in a taxi with another rabbi, and the taxi cab driver was listening to music, and in particular it was a recording of a woman singing. Well, there are those who say that you shouldn't listen to a recording of a woman singing. There are those who permit it, but there are those who forbid it. And when you're talking about people on the level of the leaders of the generation, you might assume that they would be stringent in this matter. So the other rabbi said to Rabbi Yaakov, let's ask him to turn off the music or change the station to something else. Rabbi Yaakov said, nope, I don't think we should do that. Why not? Why shouldn't you do that? You're the passenger after all. You're paying his salary. You could say, look, I'm paying you for this ride. I don't want to listen to that music on this ride. Rabbi Yaakov said, no, don't do that. He said, our safety is in his hands. He's driving us. Let him be happy. Let him be satisfied. Let him enjoy himself. If we tell him to turn it off and he feels some frustration and some irritation, that could reflect on the way he drives the car. And we shouldn't do that. Here's another example from him, which I know from someone from Ohr Somayach actually had this experience with him, which gives you an idea of what it means to live the Torah rather than just, well, in addition to following the rules, but to live it. This student of ours was driving Rabbi Yaakov from Monsey to Brooklyn. Now, both are, Brooklyn's part of New York City, and Monsey's a suburb, and it's very well populated and built up. And the question arises whether you should say the wayfarer's prayer, the traveler's prayer, or you shouldn't. There are different opinions. So this Ohr Somayach student, full of his own vast knowledge of Torah, said to Rav Yaakov, I know that there's a difference of opinion about whether one should say the traveler's prayer in this particular journey. And I also know there's a rule which says that when you're in doubt about saying a blessing, don't say the blessing. Yeah, there are a few exceptions, but that's a general rule, because when you say the blessing, you're saying God's name, and there's a serious prohibition against saying God's name in vain. And since those who say we don't have to make the prayer will say saying it would be saying it in vain, I understand that we shouldn't make the prayer on this journey. As far as it goes, perfectly good logical reasoning, perfectly good Torah reasoning. But Rav Yaakov disagreed. Because he said, there is a rule of Suffolk Brachos Lahakel, when you have a doubt about a blessing, then you should be lenient and not make it. But there's another rule, Suffolk Nefashos Lahachmir. If you have a doubt about life and death, then you have to be stringent. I thought about that. I thought to myself, wait a minute. What are you doing when you say the traveler's prayer? I know. It's a rule. It says so in the book. It's on page 62. You open it up and you read the words, you close the book, and you did it. You said the words. No, you're praying for safety so that you'll survive the trip. Hello, you're praying for life and death. Really? Oh, yeah, that's what the words say. Please save me from the kinds of things that could endanger me on the trip. That's what they say. Not that I always pay attention to the words, I just follow the rule to say the words. But he's telling me I'm praying in terms of life and death. And when you have a doubt about life and death, then you are stringent rather than lenient. I heard that. I thought to myself, do I pay attention to what I'm doing? Do I live what I'm doing? Following the rules is good. I'm not saying you shouldn't follow the rules, but am I just following the rules, or am I living it? Which brings up a story that I heard. Now, this is a very old story, maybe from 45 years ago. The old taxis that used to take you from the airport to Jerusalem was a diesel car with worn out seats and broken windows, and was, and people were crammed together. And a rabbi got in the car, and he was taking the trip, and he made the traveler's prayer. And one of the things that it says in the traveler's prayer is, please save us from chayos rohos, wild animals. Now, the driver, being Israeli, understood the words, and he started to laugh. And the rabbi said, why are you laughing? Rabbi, I understand that 500 years ago, when you traveled through the forest and so forth and so on, that's something that could happen. But today, it's just funny that you have in your prayer a phrase that doesn't relate to reality. The rabbi didn't say anything. 5 minutes later, through the open window, flew in a hornet that stung the driver, and he lost control of the car, and it went off the road, and no one was hurt. Isn't the hornet a sort of wild animal? It's a wild living thing. The word in Hebrew is chayos. Chayos just means living thing excluding vegetation. So the driver was appropriately chastened, and he realized that one shouldn't play fast and loose with the language that we have in our prayers. And what about jet planes when a bird flies into the engine? You know that there are airports that have a crew whose job it is to chase birds away from the airport. Some of them shoot at them, because they can. If a bunch hit the engine, they can down the plane. So maybe we shouldn't be so omniscient and superior that we cast aspersions on the language that we have. I have much more to say about that, but I'm not going to say any more about it now. But here you have the idea of living what you're doing, in addition to just performing what you're doing. And when you attend great people, you see that it gives you a vision of what you'd like to aspire to. And it even gives you a certain inspiration, because you can sort of intuit some of the feeling they're going through. My Rebbe Zatzal, I was with him for hundreds of Shabbosos and holidays and various types of mitzvos. The things that I saw are graved into my mind, my memory. I have images of them, and they function as a continuous inspiration. In Sukkot, you take the 4 species of plants, and you go through a waving ceremony. When you say Hallel, and you're singing, and then comes the end of the 7 days of Sukkot, and you put it away. He put it away, like everybody does, except that he kissed each one. To see him kiss them. The love for the mitzvah. Let me just inform you of something which many people don't know. The item that you use for a mitzvah has no holiness. There's no holiness in it. These strings that you use on your garments, the tzitzis, are not holy. It's called chesed shel mitzvah, but when you can't use it anymore, the strict halacha is you can throw it in the garbage. We don't, because we're sensitive. We put it in our bag and so forth and so on. We do other things with it, but it has no holiness. But he did a mitzvah with them. Because he did a mitzvah with them, he kissed them. He also kissed the roofing. The sukkah, the definition of the sukkah is something with some walls that has a right roofing. The word sukkah refers to the roofing. That's where the mitzvah lies. He climbed up on a ladder and he kissed it goodbye because he was living in it for 7 days. When he made Kiddush Friday night, I had the feeling, and I wasn't alone, that this was the last Kiddush. I don't mean anything morose. I don't mean he's going to die, but I mean this Friday night has an opportunity for only one Kiddush. There's only one. When I make this Kiddush, it's gone. This opportunity will never come back. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Next week is next week. It's not this week. That's the way he did a mitzvah. So you felt that. The love for the mitzvah and the care, the inspiration that he felt in the mitzvah, and you come to learn for yourself what it can mean to live the rules rather than just perform them in a rote fashion. There's another incident in his life. There's a wonderful hour-long interview with Rabbi Breidowitz, which I would recommend to everybody. Rabbi Breidowitz was an outstanding student in Ner Yisrael Yeshiva. In fact, I think I mentioned that there's a stipend for married students. He was the only unmarried student who got the stipend because the head of the yeshiva felt that he was worth investing in. And then the question came up whether he should go to Harvard Law School or not. And the people in the yeshiva wanted him to stay in full-time learning. They didn't want him to go to Harvard Law School. But they didn't lay down the law. They didn't decide it for him. They said, go to Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky and ask him. Okay. He went to Rav Yaakov. Now, this is what he says in the video. He said, I came, and first of all, Rav Yaakov has a worldwide reputation. Knocks on the door, and an older man in shirt sleeves greets him and says, oh, can I help you? Are you hungry? Can I make you lunch? Do you need a place to sleep, to stay overnight? That's Abraham. A Jew came to my door. So how can I help him? How can I, provide for him? No, I want to ask a question. Now, Rabbi says that he prepared ideas of Torah to discuss with him, but in sort of to establish himself, to establish who he is. But that didn't come up. And Yaakov gave him 3 hours. He's a very great man. He said, it made me feel that I'm the only person on the planet. When he was talking to me, I was his full attention. So I asked him my question, told him about my background, Rabbi says, and I asked him whether I should go to Harvard Law School or not. He said, we talked for 3 hours, and he didn't give me an answer. He just asked me questions. Have you considered this? What is your attitude towards that? What will you do about that? Just asked him questions. Partly, I guess, to assess how well this boy named Breidowitz wasn't the great Rabbi Breidowitz that he is today, how he figured it out. And secondly, he asked him leading questions, hoping that if he takes this into account, then it'll help form his vision in a more solid way. After three hours, he said to him, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I will tell you this. If you go to Harvard Law, you must figure out how your education in Harvard Law can help you serve the Creator. Because that's the goal. And that's the criterion. My Rebbe Zatzal said exactly the same thing. What's the function of Jewish education? Jewish education's job is to contribute to the development of someone who serves Hashem. The Shloah HaKadosh, the great German mystic, writes, why do we have children? What's the point of having children? That there should be more people in the world who learn and know Torah and perform mitzvahs. That's why you have children. That's the purpose of having children. So, like they used to say, keep your eye on the donut and not on the hole. Pay attention to the goal. What's the goal? That he did tell him, but he didn't tell him what to do. And, Rabbi would said, to this day, he's about 70 years old, I don't know if I made the right decision. That also is a lesson. I know I did the right thing because I asked someone, but he didn't tell me what to do. He left it up to me. Could I have made a better decision given the information that I had? Maybe. Maybe I wasn't up to the ideal in making the decision. That's honest self-scrutiny, a lack of defensiveness, and a lack of need to prove yourself, simply taking life seriously and trying to do the right thing and trying to understand as best you can. So there again, that's what Rav Yaakov's subtlety, that he's a rabbi. So people come to ask questions, give him the answer, teach him something. No. See what the person comes for, what he needs, what way you can interact with him so as to give him the best influence that you can. And there's another story about Rav Yaakov in a very similar situation, not very similar. There was a grandchild in the house with him. I don't know whether because he was older than he needed help, whatever it is, but the grandchild tells a story. Someone came to Rav Yaakov in the morning and asked him a question. Yaakov listened to the question, and he said, that's a terrific question. Terrific question. And left him with, didn't answer, as if something that he would have to think about. In the afternoon, someone came and asked Rav Yaakov the exact same question. And this time, Rav Yaakov said, the answer is such and such, immediately and fluently, without any hesitation. And the second person left. So the grandchild said, Zaidi, in the morning you were asked the same question, and you didn't give an answer. And after it seems clear that you did know the answer, you didn't look it up in between. So how come you didn't answer the person who came in the morning? He said, because he was in love with this question. He was in love with this question. If he asks and I answer like that, I might have created I'm speaking now, I might have created the impression that his question was trivial, that had no depth. If I don't answer, that credits his question. And that's what he needed. He needed to feel that the question was an important question. I know Rabbanim who do this. When someone asks a question, they'll say, wait a minute, let me look it up. And they'll take down 3 books from the bookshelf, and they'll look here. That's what it says here. Now what about this? Okay, but then, and that, and that. And after 5 minutes, they'll say, okay, the answer is this. He knew the answer the whole time, but he wanted to show the person that he took the question seriously, that it wasn't flippant. Because if you just answer off the top of your head, so to speak, then indeed it can be taken as flippant, and indeed it might become flippant. And one of the deeper lessons here is this. Let's suppose you have a friend who has a problem, and he comes to you, and he wants your help with the problem. And it's a problem that he's been wrestling with for a period of time, say a few months, and he's stressed over it, and he's, worried about it, and he's asking you for help. Suppose you say to him, "Oh, you came to the right person. I know the answer. Here, I'll give you the answer." Can you think of any negative impact that response might have?
Better than you.
Can you? I'm better than you. Okay, perhaps. But then he came to ask the question. He might be presuming that you're better because that's why he asked you the question. If he didn't think you were better, he wouldn't waste his time asking you. But okay, it's possible. From your point of view, it might stimulate pride. What else might happen?
Discredits.
Say again?
Discredits.
This what?
Discredits.
Discrediting the question. Okay, what consequence could that have?
Essentially making it seem like it was a stupid question to begin with.
Okay, right. But I think there's a further consequence to that effect. I think that effect is correct, but I think there's a further consequence to it. Let me tell you the way I think it should be handled, and then you'll see where that could go wrong. Suppose I say to him, first of all, "Wow, you're facing that? You must really be stressed. It must be very painful for you. This has been going on for several months. Wow, you're really in a tough spot." What will he say and then the next thing to say, I believe, is, "I'll think about it. I'll think about it." Then when I call him back in 2 days, I say, "I've been thinking about it for 2 days, and here's what I think might help." Here's the reaction I think is going on in his mind. When I say, "You're stressed about it," he says, "That's right. It's a serious problem. You're not trivializing my problem. You know it's a serious problem. That means you understand where I am." And when I say, "I'll think about it for a couple of days," he says to himself, "Yeah, it's a tough problem. It's not a simple problem. That's why I've been thinking about it for 3 months and I don't have an answer, because it's a really tough problem." And then in 2 days, when I call him up and say, "I think this is what you should do," he thinks to himself, right, he thinks because this is a tough problem. Doesn't have an obvious answer. He feels validated. That's what you both said already. And because he feels validated, he feels understood. And because he feels understood, he's much more likely to accept your answer. Whereas if you say, "Oh, you came to the right address, here's the answer," he says, he's treating my question as trivial in its importance and simple in its answer. He doesn't understand. And he won't accept the answer because he doesn't feel understood. So, in a certain sense, you might be presenting a false image because you're presenting the image that you have to think about it. You don't really, because you know the answer, but it might be important to present that false image. Like the rabbi who takes down several books and looks it up and then tells the person, "Yes, this is the answer. I want him to come next time and ask also." In the temple in Jerusalem, they declared the new month on the basis of witnesses who came and said they saw the new moon. Now, especially the winter months, seeing the new moon is a chancy thing. Some nights are cloudy. And it could be visible in Tiberia and not visible in Jerusalem. Well, it's a long journey from Tiberia. And someone will have to invest a lot to get on. You have to get together on the same day. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. So next morning, you have to set out and come. So what did they do? All the witnesses, and not all were the witnesses correct. They saw lights in the sky and they thought it was the moon. They had images of the moon, and they asked them, "Where did you see it in the sky? What was the orientation of the sliver?" So they could tell whether it was true or false. And sometimes it was false. But they made banquets for those people. Banquets. You came to give testimony about the moon. Congratulations that you came. We're grateful that you came, because you want to encourage them to come next time. Even the ones whose testimony was rejected. And I'm not even sure whether the court told them it was rejected. They would listen to all of them and then make their decision, yes or no. So if some said yes and they say no, then you don't know. But if some said yes and the court said yes, they still might have disagreed with some of the testimony. So you want to encourage the person to come back next time. You have to think of that outcome as well. Now this validating the person by validating the question and the suffering behind the question is a way to get the person to trust your answer more so than if you treated it trivially. You want to ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
About this example, so isn't it when someone come with the question, isn't it better to understand the point with the validation, but isn't it also better just give the answer, and if the person cannot negate it or cannot find flaws or loophole in it, then you'll get an answer and you will continue to the next question. So I just don't get like the point, I just don't get the emotional point of the validation. I just don't see it as important, because if you can think of the next step, then you will you're just wasting time for him for the next big question.
First of all, he can ask more than one question in one sitting. It's not a one question at a time operation. But I think the emotional analysis works like this. He has, let's say, an emotional conflict in a relationship. The right answer is that he should engage in a certain process of rearranging his emotions. It won't be easy. Right? And the rabbi says, here's the answer, do this. The person thinks, do this? That looks like it's very hard. Does he understand how hard it will be? Is he taking that into account? Is he taking into account how much effort that will be for me? Does he understand how much I've suffered already? If he doesn't, then it'll be the wrong advice. If he doesn't understand these things about me, then the advice he's giving me will be wrong. Not because I can find a loophole. He said to do it on Saturdays, as us or on Shabbos. No, it just won't be right for me, because he doesn't understand me. Very often, the answer to the question depends upon an understanding of the person. And if you do something to indicate that you don't understand the person, he won't trust your advice. That's a very crucial element in these things. Let me tell you another story about Rav Yaakov. This is written up. A fellow's becoming a doctor, so he finished medical school, and it's a question of residency. And residency is often on a rotation basis, and the rotation basis means sometimes you get Saturdays. Well, there are things to do as a resident which typically aren't permissible on Shabbos. There are ways to avoid it. Let's say, for example, instead of writing down someone's temperature, you have a chart, and you take a paper clip, and you put it against the number that was, and then Saturday night you can write it down for the records. There are ways to do it, but you need to do it. Sometimes you could get caught in something you didn't anticipate. This student was accepted to 2 residency programs. One which had a Shabbos program where observant Jews would not have to do their residency on Saturdays, so they would avoid the problem entirely. The other one didn't have such an exception for observant Jews, but was medically superior. Which one should he go to? When I saw the question, I thought to myself, I don't know. Thank God I said I don't know. I wasn't saying, what do you mean, Shabbos, and the merit of Shabbos will protect you, and so on and so on. Well, he said, no, go to the one that's a better medical program. Because as a doctor, you're going to make very serious decisions for people. Some of them may be life and death decisions. Get the best medical education that you can. Now again, he's not saying that he should violate Shabbos, but the idea of having an easier and more certain way of avoiding the violation of Shabbos didn't weigh against the superiority of the medical program. So here again is a situation where I don't think we would have anticipated the answer. There's a case that I heard about. Now let's see, should I mention the name? No, I can't mention the name. But there was another yeshiva for Baalei Tshuva, and there was a boy who came, very bright boy, and his parents were not religious, and he worked very hard to get them to agree that he should spend a year in yeshiva with a condition. And the condition was, after a year in yeshiva, you'll come back and go to college. Okay, you make conditions and you think about things, but he got into yeshiva and he started learning Torah, and how could I leave it? And only been it'll be a year, and there's so much more to do, and I'm in love with it, and so what should I do? So they took this boy to one of the leading Lithuanian Rosh Yeshiva. Again, someone whose name everyone in the world would recognize. And he said, go home and go to college. In all his public speeches, he was against college, and you mustn't do it, and so on. Yes, in all the public speeches, he was against it. That was the general rule for the general population. But there are almost always exceptions. And that means that even if you've heard a general statement on a subject, that doesn't mean it applies to your case. Somehow, this case of the promise to the parents, and I don't know what the other dynamics were, how serious the parents were about it, and so on. I don't know. But that's what he told them to do. So again, for the umpteenth time, not to second guess the people who are making these decisions. Here's another one. This one's published. This was Rav Yaakov Feldman. He was asked by a 14-year-old girl whose parents were not religious, and she decided she wanted to keep Shabbos. And her parents told her, in this house, you will not keep Shabbos. Not that we won't keep Shabbos for you or help you, you are not going to keep Shabbos. What should she do? So the very clever beginning scholar says, whoa, that's an explicit statement in the Talmud. Your parents cannot tell you to violate any law in the Torah. They haven't got the authority to do that. That's true. That's what it says in the Talmud. He told her, don't keep Shabbos. Why? The Talmud says that they haven't got that authority. Why did he say don't keep Shabbos? Because it wasn't a question of their authority. It was a question of what will the consequences be if you set up a war between a 14-year-old girl and her parents? Who's going to win that war? What will the outcome be? What's the probability that she'll may be able to maintain her religious commitment against the concerted effort of her parents? Now, when I was an undergraduate, I saw this happen. We had a small group of religious students, and one fellow joined us as a freshman, and his parents found out about it, and after his freshman year, they took him out of college, and they sent him to a psychiatrist for a year. At the end of the year, religion was kaput. They squashed it out of them. 2 parents with a psychiatrist, and it was over. So you have to take that into account. Now, how do you take it into account? Not on your own, you don't make your own decision, but it's a factor. It's a factor. What will be the long-term consequences of the action that you do? There are a few interactions that I had with my Rebbe because he knew me so well, as he knew many people well, where he didn't take the easy way out. When I was first getting involved, I learned a couple of laws which disturbed me. If you eat a slice of bread, then you have to say Birkat HaMazon, which is 4 fairly long paragraphs in Hebrew, which if I had said the whole thing at the beginning would have taken me half an hour. I wouldn't have understood the words anyway. But if you have steak and potatoes, it's a one-liner. One-liner. I thought, a slice of bread requires 4 long paragraphs, and steak and potatoes, a one-liner? I couldn't wrap my head around that. So I made up my mind that every time I eat steak and potatoes, I'll eat a slice of bread. And then I'll veg. Nothing wrong with that. I eat a slice of bread, so I do have to say Birkat HaMazon. And that way, I'll be saying the Birkat HaMazon after the steak and potatoes and the bread. And I was very proud of myself. I figured a way out, and it certainly accords with Jewish law. And I happened to mention offhand to the Rebbe that I had figured out this strategy. He was unimpressed, and he said, no, I don't think that's the right solution, because you think that there's something unbalanced about the halacha. Okay, you're clever enough to figure out a way to avoid the imbalance for yourself in a way that satisfies halacha. But why don't you find out why it's not unbalanced? Why don't you analyze that? That's where your real problem lies. It lies in not understanding why bread is so important and why steak and potatoes aren't so important. So instead of patting me on the back and saying that, what a good boy you are, and you thought it up, and you did it according to the law, and encouraging me and reinforcing me, he said, no, there's a lack in your understanding and your commitment to the way the Torah works. Work on that. He pointed out the insufficiency, he was a pagam, the blemish in what I was doing, rather than congratulating me for the wonderful decision that I had made. Another case, which was told me by a friend of mine, who also followed my Rebbe. He had a certain personal problem. He didn't tell me what it was, but he struggled with it, and then he had what they call an apotheosis. All of a sudden, he had a vision and a feeling. Now I see what it is. I see what I'm losing. I see what I'm destroying by doing this thing. And now I'm on a right orientation. Baruch Hashem, I've conquered it. And he went to the Rebbe and he said he wanted to tell him what a wonderful thing happened to him, what Hakadosh Baruch Hu gave him. The Rebbe told me, the Rebbe sat listening, completely impassive, no reaction whatsoever. And the Rebbe said, it'll come back. Oh, he was devastated. He thought it was over. It was a success. God favored him and put him on a new plane. The Rebbe said, it'll come back. And he told me it did come back. So instead of embracing his enthusiasm and reinforcing his positivity and praising him for the great progress he had made, he saw the failure in it, and he related to the failure in it. Now, I guess to a certain extent, you have to be a tough person to take that kind of guidance. But I don't think Rebbe gave the same guidance to every person. And he saw in me and a few others anyway, who were capable of effort, used to the idea of effort, and used to the idea of working on oneself and improving. So that's the button that he pushed for us rather than for other people. So that means when you're interacting with someone and he has a problem, realize there are various different strategies, and you don't know all of the strategies, and therefore it's worthwhile to ask people who are older, more experienced, especially people who know a lot of Torah and who live Torah, what the right way is to handle these things. I'll give you another example. This is something which in this yeshiva is practiced as a principle, and my Rebbe also practiced the principle. Let's imagine a person is developing, and he's growing in his Jewish observance, and he's taking step after step. And he comes to a point where he has a choice between two things. He's not really ready to do both of them, but he could do either one of them, and he's asking which one he should take. Now, to make it extreme, the way philosophers do, let's say one of them is keeping Shabbos, and the other one is making blessings before you eat. So anyone who's studied any Torah at all says that's a no-brainer. Shabbos is one of the 10 pronouncements at Sinai, and deliberate public defiance of Shabbos is a capital crime. And it has secondary effects and so forth and so on. And blessings, except for one, all the before you eat, they're all rabbinic. So surely you should keep Shabbos. And the answer can be no. Which one you choose isn't dictated by legal considerations alone. Psychological considerations are important. Relational considerations are important. Like that 14-year-old girl. If he's going to keep Shabbos, what's going to happen to his friendships? What's going to happen to his ability to earn a living? Some of the jobs that people take need to be work on Shabbos. What about the place where he can live, where he can get work that doesn't require working on Shabbos? So it's going to interfere with his family and his friends and maybe his ability to earn a living. Whereas the other, making blessings, you can make them silently to yourself and no one has to know. So maybe the right answer for him is to make blessings. Only someone who can see where a person is in his development and gauge what capacities he has and gauge the consequences of the decision, could make a decision like that. It isn't an obvious decision. Here's one more example, and then if you have questions, I'll take questions. This happened. It didn't happen to me, but it happened to a friend of mine who was teaching in Ohr Somayach 40 years ago. He had a fellow who came in to the shir. I guess he was in his 30s, maybe even early 40s. And he came faithfully for several months. And one day he says, Rabbi, it's been nice knowing you. I'm out of here. And I said, really? Why you have some appointment or something you got to do? No, this isn't for me. Really? Why isn't it for you? Well, I learned one of your laws, and that's it. That's it. I'm out. Which law did you learn? I learned that a man can't listen to a woman singing. So I'm out of here. So Rabbi said, really? I mean, that's the law? That's the sticking point for you? You can't overcome that thing, that desire? He said, I didn't tell you, Rabbi, but my profession is I'm an opera critic. That's what I do for a living. I listen to the performance, and I write a column for the next day's newspaper to what the performance was like. And I'm not prepared to give up my profession. Oh, the rabbi said, well, you know what? This is a serious question. Maybe we should go to a very important rabbi to ask. No, Rabbi, he says, I know what you're going to do. You're going to find a loophole and something which isn't really perfect, so forth and so on. I don't want that. I want the real thing. So he said, well, I'll take you to somebody. We'll give you the real thing and won't give you any loopholes. And won't, really give any rationalizations. So he took him, again, to someone his name will be recognized by everyone. And the boy didn't speak Hebrew, and the rabbi didn't speak English, so my friend went with him and translated for him and raised the question. The rabbi turned to my friend and he said to him, dope! Ignoramus! Fool! So my friend wanted to die. You don't know an open Gemara? An open Gemara. They didn't have operas 2,000 years ago. What do you mean an open Gemara? And the answer is, Umin Shani, can a man be a doctor and treat women? A frum religious man? Yes, he can. The Gemara asks this question. Why? Because when he's treating her as a doctor, what he has on his mind is his profession. And therefore, he's not going to be engaged. Are there exceptions? Yeah, there are always exceptions. There are people who are drunk and on drugs also. But the vast majority, when they're doing it, they're practicing their profession. That's what their mind is focused on. When this guy is sitting listening to the opera, what's his mind on? Tomorrow's column. Should I praise this or pan it? Should I say that this is better than that? And he may be sitting there with a laptop, writing up the notes while it's going on. He's practicing his profession, and therefore, listening to the woman singing is okay. I didn't anticipate that ending when he told, and I know that Gemara, but I didn't put the Gemara together with this. You see, I didn't just make the jump from doctors to opera critics. But great people do that. They can make those jumps. They can see those connections. So again, the bottom line is, don't assume that you know. Don't trust your own judgment. And when you learn, you then learn what questions to ask. You learn about kashrus, you learn about Shabbos, then you know, there's certainly something going on here, and I don't know whether these circumstances require it, and then you go and ask. Questions? Yeah.
What happened with the boy? The boy, did he stay or did he leave? The boy that got taken to the rabbi about the question.
Oh, the young man. He wasn't a boy. He was like in his 30s, his 40s. I don't know what happened to him in the end. Tell you the truth, I was so impressed with the interaction. I didn't ask him what happened. I still know him. I could ask him. I don't remember. I don't know exactly what happened. I didn't learn what happened to him. I wasn't. See, it's interesting there. You see, Ravdesta says if you give 10 people the same newspaper and ask them to read it from cover to cover, and then ask them questions, you get different answers from each person, because different things interest people and different things lodge in their minds. To me, it was the answer of the rabbi, and you want to know what happened in the story. It just didn't occur to me to ask. Okay. Have a wonderful Shabbos.